All right, guys, today we're going to talk specifically to our baseball players, their parents, and the coaches. What's necessary as regards to strength training, what's going to keep them from injury, and how do they have longevity in the sport. So our baseball players, parents, and the coaches, stay tuned for episode 53 of the theSOApodcast. And yes, Bobby's back.
Strength of America podcast.
All right, guys, welcome back. And yes, this one kind of gets to me a little bit because every year I see players that they come in here or they're recovering from injuries, whether it's their elbow or shoulders. And I think the thing that bothers me the most is we'll talk about what kind of things they're doing about injuries, what they've had, what they're doing. They're released from therapy, so they're good to go. Just because you finish therapy doesn't mean you're good to go. What it means is you're pain-free, that range of motion. Now you're ready to start training and get ready to play again. But it doesn't mean grab a ball and let's go crazy with it. So I think one of the things we want to take a look at are really the what and how. But to me, we know the basic things. There was an article a week ago. I'll see if I can find that and I'll attach it to this so you guys can see. But it was an orthopedic put out this comment about how Little League was doing a great job on trying to cut down on these injuries. And it mentioned, the number of pitch counts, that they should take 2 to 4 months off, before going into the next season. They shouldn't be playing on more than one team at a time, shouldn't be doing year-round ball. All that's great. However, what was never mentioned was strength training, mobility training to keep them healthy in that. Because we also know it sounds good to take that time off, but the baseball players that we know pretty much do year-round baseball. So they're not taking the time off. They're not communicating between coaches on pitch count with both coaches. Most of them, when I talk to them, they're not counting even the pitches, their warm-up. They're only counting on the mound pitches. Well, the warm-up pitches, the bullpen pitches, all those count in your pitch count. Otherwise, your numbers are crazy how many they're going into. So I think what we want is just a big part is figuring out, okay, if you're not going to, I gave up on telling them to quit playing year-round because most of them are in that mentality. They think the only way I'm going to play college ball is I've got to play year-round. But you talk to most of these college guys and the pros for sure, most of them are multi-sport athletes. They played more than one sport. So they don't need to do it year-round. They need to take time off to let them heal. But what are some of the tests or what are some of the things you do with the baseball players that you work with to try and cut down on some of these injuries or at least make them aware of what they should be doing?
Well, I don't get too crazy. At my school at Chandler Prep, it's a little bit different. So we do have, thankfully, a lot more multi-sport athletes. We don't get many that just play one sport year-round. So luckily, in my situation, it's more of just general training that we're trying to do. So we're not discluding barbell bench or any of that type of stuff preseason. We're still loading that in. If people do have any irritations, we'll maybe limit range of motion and press from like a foam piece to restrict range of motion, or we may just send them off to one-arm dumbbell bench presses or heavy weighted push-ups and things like that. So right off the bat, when I'm thinking about getting my kids, most of the time it's just about trying to develop a foundation for them. That way they can express it better when they get out to the field. Now, when we do go in season, I do say, hey, we're probably going to do a floor press. That way, because I got plenty of football players thinking about more so football than baseball at the moment. So it's still trying to develop strength and some other things on top of that, but I'll give them the option of doing that or a one-arm dumbbell bench press.
So the floor presses, what are those for? I'm not familiar with it.
Just lying flat on the ground, and they just bench from there, so their elbows touch the ground, and then they press back up. So now you're not getting into too much of the shoulders, protracting, retracting, different things like that. We kind of limit more of the range of motion so we're not getting too deep, stressing on some of the anterior glide of the shoulder or different things of that nature. But I give them options and I let them know if something's bugging you, don't keep going through with it. Let's find an alternative that we can do that we can still focus on getting stronger, because at the end of the day, I want my kids to know that if it's something that they feel like it's hurting them or not feeling good, they're obviously not pushing it. Right. So I want to make sure that they're finding something that they feel good, that they can keep moving and pressing forward. But with your case, like a Red Mountain, for people that are coming year round, maybe it's thinking, okay, maybe less of we're not doing overhead pressing, or if we are, we're prepping them for push presses so they're getting their lower body used to working and helping. It's just not strict overhead. But you probably have to do, especially for more of those kids, more assessments on maybe it's just a floor reach. Can they lie on the ground? Can they keep their rib cage locked down and tight? Can they get their arms overhead? And then how much flexion can they get? How's their rotator cuff? How's their chest stretch? Different things like that. And a lot of those kids, I've done even simply on myself after straining. I can't even tell what it was, but I think it was more of the attachment point of my lat after my first time ever wakeboarding and being stubborn. But I found out that just after the injury, and I don't know if it was partially because rotator cuff was weaker on this side than the other, or if because of now the injury, now it's a little bit weaker because how things are going. But I was going through and just doing a cable external rotation, and I found out that, wow, that left side is definitely a lot weaker. So, I mean, most of the time just through training, I'm assessing people through their warm-ups or when they're training. Like if I definitely have them do a barbell bench press and they look like one side's crushing it, one side's not, it's like, okay, let's probably go to a one-arm dumbbell bench press, or things of that nature. And I'm using the barbell bench press, and this thing is like an example for a lot of these because it's real easy to see. It's not the king of all or end all be all, obviously. But.
Yeah, well, I think that's great, and I think that's where you're taking a look at assessing those things, and where people think players can't do bench press, or they can't do overhead, they can't do anything. You've got a couple basic things that if you're really serious and that athlete is going to be playing baseball year-round and you're going to keep up with them, I'd number one, talk to an orthopedic or get somebody to do an x-ray basically to see what's going on. With the shoulders, so many times there's a chromium process that comes out where they talk about some athletes just can't do overhead throwing, or swimmers have problems, or presses. So much of it comes from the acromion process that sticks out, actually curls in some people. So if it's flat out here, that overhead rotation and movement, we're fine. But if you've got an athlete that has that acromion actually bends down and it comes like a little bit of a hook, I wouldn't recommend them doing baseball and swimming, because you're going to have how many repetitions over and over and over, you're going to destroy, and it's going to rip up that joint. So it's an early process. If you wanted to, you take a look, we do an x-ray, we see if that's a problem or not. If it doesn't have that cup that's rolling into it, great, let's go for the sport. If you want to specialize and really look at it. Now, some think that's a little over the top, but I'd rather say if I'm coming from a baseball family and I'm going to put this, my kids are going to play baseball, I'd want to do that first. We'd have that x-ray just to see, is that potentially going to be a problem, so you can make a better choice later, or at least understand, well, I've got to really put extra effort here. Here's what I need to do with mobility or strength training. But that's one way to take a look at that. So not all have a problem with bench press or overhead. Or again, like Bobby said, do a floor bench where we hit that, the elbows hit. We don't go all the way down. We hit that point. We still get good chest work, anterior work we're after. It just is a lot safer for them to do that. But like you said, you'll have some that dominate one side or another. And if you stay dominant one side and you don't work on the weaker side of balance, it doesn't matter if I'm a right arm thrower, that's stronger, this is weak. If that stays really strong and they continue to get stronger, you're going to start having new problems throughout your neck, your shoulders, your spine, because of the pull you're getting from the pecs or from the back of the shoulder as well. So I think it's important to look at why and what you're going to do. If you're going to go year-round, fine. But here's what you need to do the process. You really need to take some time off and adjust. Time off doesn't mean you hang out and relax. What it means is you train and get your body prepared for that sport coming up, so they can better handle the stress of it. But I noticed, in fact, I had a couple of baseball players that came in over the summertime, and I checked with all of them. I want to know what sports they are, so I know what I need to target. And these guys in particular were baseball. I knew they played year-round. So we talked to them about, do you guys do your external rotations and your internal, and are you doing reverse flies, face pulls, all that? Oh, yeah, we're doing all that. Great. I said, great. Humor me. Show me how you do it. This is where we get into it. Just because we do it, or we have baseball coaches that'll say, no, it's all right, we got that covered, we don't need to worry about that, because somebody's already doing it. How they're doing it is key. That's like saying, yeah, I squat and I bench press, but my squat's terrible, my form is terrible, I can't do this, I'm bouncing the bar off on the chest on the bench press. How you do it is critical. So he grabbed the tubing, and I had him do his external rotation, and he could barely come out. Or what he was doing was dropping that elbow down. So the wrist was dropping below the elbow. We weren't getting any of the work we were after, the rotator cuff. So we pulled him where he needed to be, And man, he could barely get that out to where the arm was when he should be extending beyond. So I had no idea. And I showed him the left side. He was just the same. So he was weak on both sides. But again, if they're finishing their therapy, they're finishing their time off where they've been injured, and they can't have a good full range of motion going into it without pain, or definitely couldn't even get there. There wasn't even a pain issue, was just too weak. We need to be doing something about it. It's like the face pulls. We're pulling the face pulls, but my elbow is dropping down here. That's not doing anything for you. We've got to make sure we're pulling to the face. That's why we say that. You pull the elbows high. So I think rather than going through all the steps today, I want you to follow through Instagram if you're not already, because Bobby are gonna put daily posts throughout this next week for you. It'll either be on our story or on the main part, but we'll make sure each day for the next 5 days, Monday through Friday, we're going to have something each day showing you components of mobility where you need to check, what's going on with the shoulders, where they're at range of motion, how to do a proper chest stretch, is it thumbs up or thumbs down, what you're looking for on these stretches, and then check your athletes out on this. And don't just ask them, are you doing all these things? Are you doing them correctly as well? And really, these things should be done. How often should we be doing some of these strength things? I mean, we've typically told them, I want my guys doing it every day. We don't do a large volume of it, but I want them working that daily, going through that. It changes during the season, but I've also told them, where years ago we used to say, okay, that's a great warm-up going into it. That's the last thing I want to do is really exhaust that rotator cuff and work through all the shoulder, and then now let's go out and pitch and throw. Just like my football players, if we're working the neck strength, I don't want them to do it just prior to practice because they fatigue the neck and then they start hitting, what's going to happen? A neck injury. So I think it's key is what we do. But, I mean, are there particulars here, Bobby, on this kind of topic and things going that send a trigger?
First, on the volume, I think, I try to think about anything we're doing with like load, whether it's like a rowing, a chin up, and that's another conversation too. Some say don't do a lot of overhead pulling. And most of the time, that's if you're year-round, you have a lot of elbow, shoulder. Okay, then stay more horizontal with your pulling and what you're doing. But if you don't, probably do a little more horizontal than you are vertical, but don't neglect the vertical pulling either. As far as like loading, 2 times a week, like heavy, is probably a good point to work on some strength. But outside of that, I think banded face pulls, banded reach bounds, banded pull aparts, external rotations. Anything, especially with bands, I think should be more of a daily thing. That way you can almost develop that GPP or general physical preparedness and just the conditioning and a little bit of the size of the muscle. But more than that is thinking about like warm-ups. You know, when you go through warm-ups, you're thinking about getting the right things ready so they're in the right postures, right positions. So if I want to go throw, I kind of want to wake up those muscles after sitting like this or sleeping. That way I'm in a better position anyway. So I think of it more like as an activation.
Yeah, and that's why what we're talking about with that is we're not going to full rep. We're not cranking out until we just can't move it. That's our strength training. That's mobility. We're trying to get the nerves fire. We're trying to get ready. That's great. Put all that stuff into it. And that's why I think when people say, well, therapy, I'm doing 2 to 3 days a week, that's what I need to stay on. Well, if you talk to most therapists, they'll tell you the insurance company is the one that tells you need 2 to 3 days a week. That therapist will tell you, I want you doing this stuff every day. But they won't allow it, so it's going to cost too much, so that's why we do it that way. So daily stuff is real important. Plus, it, like you said, it activates the muscles, gets them ready, but I like it because we work the core. If I'm working our single arm movement with a tubing pulling out, I'm just not letting them yank their body around. They're keeping their hips in, their good pelvic tilt, everything's centered as we pull so that we're getting more than just the back of the shoulder in. We're trying to work everything at the same time. So it's key that we understand. I just want this topic to come out a little bit, get our baseball players, because some of them, again, you're year-round, you're playing right now. If you're thinking about spring comes on pretty quick. You don't work to strengthen your shoulder to get ready in December and January. Here we are in August. Get working on it now. Get your stuff ready to go. So come January, you're actually prepared and you can handle the stress of the sport. It's a lot of games, a lot of throwing, and again, if you're on multiple teams, your body's not going to handle it. And I've got too many kids that we'll see 13, 14 years old already know somebody with Tommy Johns or a rotator cuff tear or something happening, or they've been through them themselves. And matter of fact, I was talking to one of the kids we knew back in high school, worked with him a year back there, and he continued on afterwards. They ended up, the pitch count was ridiculous, how many throws these guys would do. And he's been through 2 shoulder surgeries, or 2 Tommy Johns already with his elbows. And he's not done yet. They messed up on one, have to do it again. And his pitching time, he's done playing ball. And here he is, 19, 20 years old. So that shouldn't be happening. And that's the job and the responsibility of the parent to ask the coaches, what are they doing? Okay, great. You're doing exercises. What exercises? How often are they doing them? It's okay to ask that. It's not getting on a coach and, questioning them is okay. Just like your doctor, you should be asking questions about it too, so that we can make better choices on that as well. And if you have questions at all, holler out to me. We'll also put a tag for Eric Cressy, because he's got, he's the baseball guy. He's got all kinds of stuff on shoulder, and he does a ton of things. But again, make sure if you're not on the Instagram, get on that right now. It's the SOA Podcast. We'll have the link below. And then look for it throughout the next week in either our main line or the stories throughout the week. But every day, Monday through Friday, we'll post something specifically for you baseball players and what you should do. But comment below also, what kind of things are you doing? How often are you doing? What are you told, or who says it's bad to do? Let's help you with those questions so we can keep you guys safe so you can play. And again, I'm sorry I put baseball, but I know it's the softball players as well. But my softball players tend to listen to me a little bit better than the guys do. But that's all right. They're all hard workers. We just want to see you guys stay healthy and play longer. And some of you having some problems earlier, your 7th, 8th grade, take the time off. Let's get healthy so you're not one of the ones in high school that went, man, I wish I'd have listened and taken that time off in 8th grade and only played one season instead of year round. And let's get strong and healthy as you go so you can play.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think don't be afraid, especially if you're in baseball, the old stigma of strength training is bad, resistance training is bad. I think a lot more finding out now it's going to help out with injury resiliency, keeping you playing more often, healthier, and increasing your performance. But I got to also think some of us are so scared to take time off from baseball that if I go with the same product year to year and did not increase my horsepower, I just sharpen the skills, am I going to see a huge difference? So I think that's what people need to realize is take a little bit of time off, let the body heal up, rebuild the body. That way it's stable, healthy, and it's got a good foundation for the next season. But also take some time to work on some strength, and then you can develop some power from that, and you can have some greater horsepower to send that ball, or throw that ball harder. But we have to understand that I can't try to come back with the same product year to year. There's other things I have to do outside of that. Just don't be afraid of it, and know that there's substitutions. If, again, like we were saying, if a bench press or overhead press doesn't feel good, great, we can landmine press. We can one-arm down. There's always an opportunity and a way to get strong. You just got to be willing to find the opportunity and ask questions. So
you should not be having joint pain while you do it. So if you do, tell your coach, talk to somebody about it. Find another way you can make a rotation so you can do something to work that. Okay, there's always a way you can get it done. But again, look at those really good college, and especially those pros. They're not a bunch of skinny guys. They're strong. They're big. They've been lifting. You have to lift. That's for your speed, your power, everything. You're hitting, throwing. It's not just about tubing for your shoulders. There's a lot to it. So let us know how we can help. I appreciate you guys, your time as always in episode 53. And get to the podcast, Instagram, everything else, and we'll see you. Oh, last thing, August 10th, we're coming up. It's a week away. I still have, I think, about 3 more spots for coaches or parents, whoever want to come in. And I've got, I think, about 10 more for athletes. So if you want to bring your team or somebody into it, it's a free clinic. It's our 30th anniversary at Chandler Prep. We're going to be down there. The link is there as well. You can go to strengthofamerica.us. Partway down, you'll see the link with the photo, and sign up for that. Our athletes 10 to 17. Our coaches, parents, and PE teachers, we're going to go through from 8 to 10 in the morning, specifically on how to increase speed, agility, and power, but in a short time, like your warm-ups, without adding time to your practice. We're also going to show you how to potentially help and reduce knee injuries. What are we looking for? How do we fix that? And our baseball, I know I've got some baseball coaches coming, so we will be talking arm care as well. And the last part, which is the frustration of how do we get these kids to eat properly so they have really the energy we need and recovery. We're going over that for you too as well. Then once we get through the coaches, we'll feed you. 10:30 to 12 is the athletes, 10 to 17. You get to see how we put the rotations in our athletes. You'll get to see all the little things that make a difference on increasing speed and power, how to eat, and be ready for the next year's season. So appreciate you guys. We'll look for you. We'll see you next week on the 10th for that. And let us know if you have questions.
all right, see ya.
Thanks.